Welcome to another episode of the Hoopsfix podcast with me, your host Sam Nita, full-time British basketball advocate. And on this week's show, we have something a little bit more reactive, a little bit more timely, based on a big announcement that happened very recently. 2K Foundations announced a big-time investment into the City of Birmingham Basketball Club, obviously in Birmingham. As part of that investment, they are going to be renovating their sort of main venue in Nechells Sports Centre. Which definitely needs a makeover, and it's going to have seating put in, it's going to have floors redone, it's going to have the lighting redone, it's going to have scoreboards redone, and then also an investment into the community program. So I thought it would be interesting to have Rob Palmer, who is the director of the City of Birmingham, director and founder of the City of Birmingham Basketball Club, founded in 2003, and obviously 17 years later, still going, to kind of talk about that investment, what it means for the club, and also kind of his story and the progression of the club over the years. Obviously, they're very notable because in 2015, they formed a partnership with NBA Hall of Famer Hakeem Olajuwon, who just so happened to relocate to Birmingham because one of his children was enrolled at the university there and then wanted to get involved with grassroots basketball. So it's been an incredibly fruitful partnership for the club, and I thought it would be super interesting to kind of dissect it all, not just the investment from 2K and kind of what it's going to mean for the program, but also the partnership with Hakeem, the journey of the club, kind of where it started to, where it's going to, and kind of what it's done. So yeah, it was a super interesting conversation, which I think you will take a lot of enjoyment from. As always, before we get into the show, please take 2 seconds to go and check out our Patreon account, patreon.com/hoopsfix. That's patreon.com/HOOPSFIX. There you can start to give us a monthly or annual contribution of as much or as little as you'd like to help us do the work that we're doing. It doesn't have to be a lot of money, but it does go a long way in funding everything that we're trying to do in terms of growing the British basketball media landscape. So please go and check it out, patreon.com/hoopsfix. As always, if you watch on YouTube, please leave a comment below. Let me know what you think about what Rob had to say and what they're building in Birmingham. Meanwhile, you can reach out to me on every single social media platform at Hoopsfix, or if you prefer some one-on-one interaction, if you've got any questions, any thoughts about this that you'd like to go into more depth with, drop me an email, sam@hoopsfix.com. Anyway, that is enough from me. Here is this week's show with Rob Palmer. Rob, welcome to the show.
Morning, Sam. Great to be with you. Appreciate the invite.
Yeah, obviously, you're another one that's been on my list for a little while, but it seemed like a perfect time to do it now because of this big announcement that's happened in the last week. Essentially, what has been announced is 2K Foundations, which I assume is sort of the charitable arm of 2K, is going to be working in partnership with the City of Birmingham Rockets to pretty much refurbish your entire facility. I mean, I guess the place to start is like, how did that come about, and sort of what does it mean for the club? What is going to be the sort of the tangible outcomes of the project?
Yeah, well, first of all, Sam, it was it's been I guess a surreal 6 months process, really. Just not long after lockdown, we were contacted by the 2K UK arm, just with the question, would we be interested in our facility, being renovated and refurbed? I think the same email was sent to the council at the time, as it's a local authority-run centre Nechells, that we've played out of since 2003, really. So obviously the response back was yes, we would be interested, and a conversation pursued. And what struck us really, myself and Kirk, right from the outset, was the positivity behind the 2K guys. So, normally we'll speak to people that or funders or guys that, express interest in doing things, and there'll be lots of conditions or restrictions in place. But it appeared like a really simple process from their end, and they were just like really enthusiastic. They'd obviously asked about what the club was about, what we did, what we delivered. They'd done their research on us beforehand. And really, the information they gave us was that the 2K Foundation, the global foundation in the US, had done a number of renovations over in the States, but we're now opening that up to a global arm, really, or global applications. So we fell under do fall under the European section of that. But there was a real positive vibe about it. They had a real kind of confidence that we've got a good chance of making this happen. So really, the application was completed for us by the 2K guys. And within 2 weeks, we got a response that it was looking pretty positive.
Wow.
Which
Yeah.
was
Go on. Sorry.
no, not at all. So on the back of that, really, then it obviously we finally got the confirmation through. I think we were looking towards the end of July that the funding had been allocated, and then the process for us since then has been negotiating with the City Council, just around the renovation and what bits of the centre would be done, when they'd be done, and you can imagine there's other users in the site as well. So there's consultations that have had to take place. So we've had good engaging conversations right from the start with 2K, and then the council have come in, and been reasonably supportive in that as well. Certainly on a local level, we've always had really strong relationships with the centre manager there, and it's been a good process for us, because now we've been able to engage with the council on maybe a more strategic level as well. So I think that brings other benefits for us moving forward with a little bit of luck.
I mean, yeah, to be honest, that feels to me a super quick process. I'm involved in my own projects at the moment. We're trying to renovate some courts in London, and that has been ongoing for years, actually, from when I initially had the first idea. And to hear that's sort of come to life at the start of lockdown, and now here you are sort of 6 months later, and it's confirmed and likely to be happening. The build is going to start going to be finished by early 2021, is that right?
Yeah, the planning, well, believe it or not, the lighting work actually started last Monday.
That's the biggest thing that everyone said on Instagram. It's like, oh, no more yellow lights. And I know I filmed at the centre a couple of times, and like all my video from there is just bright yellow. No matter what I do, whatever colour correction I do, it's just always just so yellow.
If you look at the before and after, so the lighting is going to be, so it's 5 rows of new lighting. The outside lights will be dimmable, so we can kind of make a show court area within that. So middle lights have been put up already. They're in the process now. I think the next couple of days of completing the lighting, and it looked that I guess that orange yellow haze that has been there for 20 years. It looks like a different centre already. I must say, I was down there last Friday just to have a look and see what the progress was like, and it's transformed already. So naturally, it's just so exciting for us in being able to transform that and make that a much more user-friendly facility for the not just the players but the spectating experience as well. There's weekends where you'll spend 8 or 9 hours a day inside there, and you literally do come out and your eyes are. It's an amazing feeling when you get outside and you've got some natural light, and obviously from a visual point of view, huge differences. So, look, I mean that was on our hit list when we prioritised things. The lighting was really high up there on that list.
What is the so when we talk about sort of the actual where that money is being invested into? I'm going to go completely from my memory here, but you've essentially got lighting. New hoops, scoreboards, I think it was scoreboards, and then obviously spectator seating, sort of the refurb of 2 training courts. Is that essentially sort of branding up the courts and stuff like that? Like, kind of what exactly is it going to, when you look about what it is now, what's going to change after this investment's been done? Yeah,
so 5 major items on the refurb, Sam, the lighting being the first. The existing floor will be sanded and sealed and relined. Which is obviously that will transform the existing playing courts. But and one of the negotiations and one of the slight holdups we've had has been around we're going to have a court stained across the centre of show court. Now that means to do that and really make it look special, it meant taking out 4 of the middle badminton courts of the existing courts. Now, obviously, we've had some challenges along the way on that and made some compromises. So there's a couple of rollout mats that we're purchasing, to kind of offset the disruption to the badminton users, as you can imagine. But the stain court will look spectacular across the middle when it's done, and that will be logoed up. The 2K Foundations logos will be on that, and the club logo will hit the centre circle. That's the second item. Portable goals, so high-spec portable goals that will come out for the show court. He says scoreboard, so it'll be we're looking at some kind of FIBA level scoreboard for that show court. I'd imagine that will be usable on one of the side courts as well, but the 24-second shot clocks, etc., will be attached to the backboard, so that'll all be linked up together. And then the seating is the fifth area.
What is the capacity for the seating? That wasn't in any of the announcements, but do you know roughly, how many seats you're looking at?
Yeah, so existing, we're looking at the moment, we're looking at 10 blocks of 24 seats as part of the 2K funding. Now, with the health and safety issues and the walkways and the bars at the end of each set, that gets reduced to 215 on the sets that we're looking at. One of the conversations with the city has been around whether they might match that and buy another 10 blocks to go on the opposite side of the court, which would then give you 430 seats. Along with the sit-down seats you could have then, you're probably up to around 500. And you finally get a mini arena that the city hasn't had or has been lacking for such a long time.
Do you feel confident that you could fill a 500-seat venue?
At the moment, no. So that's why the match funding from the city at the moment is an ongoing talk really, and we've got we have no urgency to do that. But I would say on junior games, we've had junior games where we've had 200 through the doors, as it's been in the past, Sam. So I think the appetite across the city is there potentially for to come in into a good spectating environment, and obviously a product that matches it. But we think in the future with some of the plans that we have in place that certainly is a realistic aim and goal.
The big question, the obvious question that I think came to a lot of people's minds, it definitely was one of the first ones that came to my mind when I saw the venue, obviously before I knew the spectator numbers, was the BBL, and whether this is potentially laying the foundations for a potential BBL franchise. Is that something that is potentially on your radar at some point in the future? Is it something that you're aspiring to do? Or do you still think, at the moment, you want to focus on kind of what you're doing with the club, and, that's kind of way off?
We've... Our priority, Sam, has always been our youth development programs. So I think whatever we did in the future would it couldn't be at the detriment or the risk of that program. That's one thing we've always been really clear on. We've had a couple of approaches over the past 5 years. There's no secret in that, and spoken to potential partners about how that might look, and we'll continue to do that. Really, is probably where we're at the moment. So, is it on the radar? It's always kind of there and around, and talks that we would engage with if it was right for us. Our own plans right now are to try and make that get in through to a D1 team really on what we've got right now, and try and build that organically, that organic growth. And if we're in a position where a potential BBL team came along and we can be involved in that or support that in some way, shape or form, then we're definitely very open to that.
How far are those conversations gone with the league office? We know the BBL has been pretty open about sort of their own expansion aspirations, and Birmingham is, it is the city that is always spoken about as needing a franchise. Kind of, has the league been receptive to it? Have you had conversation with the league about it?
Yeah, the league had approached us with a couple of prospective partners in the past, and just for one reason or another, that things just didn't transpire or weren't right at the time to follow that through. But I know the league are very, very keen on a Birmingham franchise. Naturally, there's no secret to that. So I think as more opportunities or more potential investors or partners came into the fray there, that they know we're certainly interested in talking with them about the possibilities.
When it comes to 2K getting involved, the other thing outside of the venue I noticed in the press release was that there's actually funding that's going towards sort of ongoing community work. There's going to be a 2K league. There's going to be community sessions run, like kind of outside of the venue stuff. What else is going to be happening? What else is the sort of 2K Foundation's money funding?
Yeah, so the one of the fabulous thing about 2K was that they really valued what the club is doing and had done for sort of 17 years now. So one of their requests was that some of the funding that they'd aligned to us was put into a community activation program to enhance our community program. And we've got a pretty extensive community program as it stands anyway. We kind of on average reach 500 kids a week on program. But I think 2K were keen that more kids got opportunity to not just use the facility at Nechells, but access basketball around the city. So, although we're still putting the finer details together, the plan would be a kind of a citywide schools program labelled up with the 2K branding, and then a central venue leagues. So what we're working with the sports centre and the council on now is some extended hours on a weekend to be able to run additional activities. So you can probably imagine the city council still close the site at 5 on a Saturday generally and 3 on a Sunday. So there's loads of spare time and extra time there that we felt could be utilised effectively. So we're just trying to come to the right agreements for both parties there at the moment on how that would look. But generally, we'd be looking at some, as I say, central venue leagues based at the centre, but the outreach work to hopefully just get into more basketballers around the city.
And would that funding be, based on 12 months, or is it longer than that?
We've kind of worked it over a 2-year period. So I think one of our plans at the moment would be maybe to engage I guess either a part-time or full-time employee to oversee that community program growth. We feel we've got enough in the tank there for a couple of years initially, but like anything within the organisation, we try and ensure that became sustainable over a period of time. But having a little bit of taking the pressure off and having that seed funding to begin with, and not feeling the immediate pressure on that, just helps you create the product in the first place, really.
When you talk about the scale of the actual sort of size of that investment, are you able to share kind of like what that is sort of roughly worth in terms of the investment they're putting into sort of basketball in Birmingham, your program?
Well, it's the investment into the facility is a significant amount. I would say that. So it's that touches on just under 5 figures. The community activation support, not quite to that amount, but it's enough for us to put a significant program together. I think would be fair to say, over that 2-year period. Now, obviously, COVID has potentially just slightly delayed the beginning of the community activation process, and we just have to play that by ear a little bit on that. But it is, the good thing with 2K is that they're really leaving it to us as to how we utilise that best for the community. Which is fabulous for us.
Do you think, interestingly, any conversation I've had with potential commercial partners, private sponsors around the Hoopsfix All-Star Classic, it's always about London. They're very clear about the fact, and I've had conversations with various people about moving outside of London. I've had venues offered to me outside of London, which would make everything a lot cheaper on my end. But the sponsors, various different sponsors I've had conversations with, basically it has to be in London. And if it's in London, we just can't be involved. It's such a focal part of their strategy. When I look at 2K investing in Birmingham, my first thought is that because of the Commonwealth Games in 2022? Has that played a role in their decision to invest in Birmingham, or was it something completely different?
It's nothing they brought to the table with us, to be honest with you, Sam. And obviously, part of our strategy and thoughts on the maybe on the Central Venue League, maybe to align that with a Commonwealth Games in mind and strategy. Some of that stuff might be 3-on-3 leading into the Commonwealth Games, just to engage our communities as much as we can. With that big event coming to the city, but it wasn't anything that 2K had brought to the party. They were, I'd imagine that when they'd done their research, they'd seen the work we'd done over a period of time. I'm sure they've noticed Hakeem Olajuwon is linked with the club, and there's an NBA link there to the 2K games. But there was nothing specific around the Commonwealth Games that they brought to the party now.
Fair enough. You mentioned it there. Let's talk about Hakeem's involvement. Obviously, it was 2015 when he first got involved with the club, right?
It was, yeah.
Yeah, and I think I remember at the time it was his daughter that enrolled at the University of Birmingham, right? And there was footage coming out of Birmingham. I was getting sent of him playing one-on-one with kids at university, and just kind of all this crazy stuff. And it's like, what? Hakeem's in Birmingham. What's going on? Can you kind of talk about sort of, I guess, him coming over to the UK and how he has ended up being essentially an ambassador and part of the City of Birmingham Rockets program?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it was a nice story really. One of our volunteer coaches, his wife works at I think an immigration law firm somewhere on out in I think it's on the Stratford Road, going out towards Sparkhill Shirley Way. I got a phone call or a message from him on one day just to say, "You'll never believe who's walked through the doors at my wife's workplace." And Hakeem had gone in, and I think he just said, "So look, I used to play basketball in the States." And she said, "Oh, my husband's involved with a basketball club." He said, "Oh, that's good because I'm interested in doing some, supporting something or doing something while I'm over here." And so that's how the connection came through to us. His number was sent through. We got in touch, and then Kirk, who I mentioned earlier, Kurt Dawes, is our chair. I'm sure we'll touch on Kirk's involvement at some time during the conversation. Kirk and I went to meet him, and it was a hotel over in Knoll on the edge of Solihull, and he got out of his car, and he kept getting out of his car, and he kept getting out of his car, and just the most humble man right from the outset, Sam, you could wish to meet. He had got so much interest in what we were doing. And obviously, we're kind of starstruck as we're sitting there having a coffee and a drink with him. But he spoke about his kids, and obviously, as you mentioned, his daughter had come to University of Birmingham, but he got 5 boys that had never picked a ball up, and he was always very clear on the fact that he wanted it to be their decision to play, not him pushing it into it. He wanted them to get a feel for the game. So, we did what we always do with new people that we talk to, really. And it was, look, we can tell you about the club, and we can show you our social media, we can show you our website, we can talk about what's gone on, but come and see it. Come and see it in the flesh. So he came down on I think it was a Saturday morning to begin with. The gym's always packed on a Saturday with recreational kids on a Saturday morning. So, that will vary from 60, 70 kids up to 120. And he was like, wow, okay. And then we said, look, come back again on Monday, bring the boys down and have another look. And of course, again, Monday's one of our big practice nights. So the gym is packed again. The boys start joining in and playing. And we never look back from there, really. He's genuinely grown to love the club. Very early on, he said, look, what is it that you'd like to do here? And we set out a few priorities along the way. And he was, look, I'll support you where I can. It's not going to be me paying for everything. I think there's probably a misconception that Hakeem bankrolls us, and that is far from the truth. But he's always said, look, I'll help you with the little things where I can. And we spoke about the court renovation from a very early time, and what owning our own facility might look like. And we spoke about international summer camps and residential stuff that Birmingham hadn't had for years and years and years. And we spoke about academic support around academies and what we could do around education, as he's very big on education. And one by one, we tried to address that kind of priority checklist with him along the way. But he's become an integral part of the club, and just to have him there on a Saturday morning on occasions where he used to bring his sons down, and he'll be helping some kid out on the side who's got no idea who he is. He's just a parent that's jumped off his seat to show him a few things. I mean, that's like an amazing sight to see, really.
He's actually moved to the UK, and he's fully living near himself now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So he, I think his visa restrictions means that maybe it's sort of 6 months here and 6 months in Euston. He's still employed by Euston as an ambassador for the Rockets, so he still spends time over there. And he's 2 of his boys in the past 12 months have gone over there now at school in Euston. But as he said quite recently, he came back in, I think it was February time for a couple of weeks to sort some business out at home, and he's not been able to go back since. So he's had the most of the year over here, at home here. But he's a wonderful he really is a wonderful man. There's no edge on him. There's no, it's the most humble guy you could wish to meet. Someone that everybody that you can imagine the amount of parents that come across him and want photographs and stuff on a weekly basis at the centre, and he's just so obliging with them. And so look, our experience with him has just been top draw, Sam.
What difference does it make to the club having an NBA Hall of Fame, an NBA legend sort of associated with it? Does it give you leverage when you go into meetings, whether it's with the council, whether it's with a potential commercial sponsor? Like, kind of when you talk about the club pre-Hakeem and post-Hakeem, what's different now compared to before?
I think a lot of that is the profiling, Sam. In that when we were doing a lot of work, there was a lot of work went on for a long period before Hakeem arrived, and that sets a lot of the foundations for maybe the things that have happened in the last 5 years since he's arrived. But as you say, having that weight maybe to go in with potential partners probably wasn't there to the extent it is now. So Hakeem's very clear. Look, if there's a meeting, I'll come into the meeting with you with the decision makers. More than happy to spend his time on that with us. And I think it just adds some real gravitas to the story. The club's got a lovely story over a long period of time, and to have a Hall of Famer come in to that and embrace that, I guess enjoy and love what it does and where it's at, and he genuinely does love the club. That's been a real bonus for us, and obviously we can attract a much wider audience to what we're doing just by using his name. So that's been a huge bonus for us, and we've been very careful to use him very selectively and carefully as well, because I think if we don't want to lean on him for more than we need to. We're very conscious of trying to create a long-term sustainable club and model, and we've got a lot closer to doing that now. It really has accelerated some of those things, but just being able to to have him come along with us for certain meetings and appearances, and he's so generous with his time, Sam, as well. They've been the real major benefits for us. And like I said, we have to be careful, because I think some people think that Hakeem's funding you with this and funding you with that, and that's not the case. But we are able to leverage ourselves into some better positions because of our connections with him.
And I assume that the rebrand to the Rockets, a part of that was the alignment with Hakeem, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. I mean, for where are we going? For 16 years, we were the City of Birmingham, or COB tagline was kind of where we went with that, and but we always felt there was something just on the end of that missing. But rebranding the longer you go in one brand, it gets a little more difficult to. Now, from a personal perspective, you've got an allegiance almost to COB and that brand, and then finding the right brand and at the right time. And we toyed with some ideas based around some Birmingham landmarks and things that around the city, but it just seemed like a very natural thing to cement our relationship with Hakeem, and look at some possibilities of how things in Euston that we might be able to tap into at some stage in the future, really, with him. So it was strategically aligned with Euston Rockets for sure, but it just seemed a very natural thing based upon Hakeem's attachment with the club.
Yeah. Okay, so let's kind of rewind. I got you to send me through the sort of overview of your history and the club's history going way back. I mean, it was fascinating for me to kind of go through it and sort of learn more about you, because obviously, there's stuff going back to when I was a mere toddler and had no idea about it. So your involvement with basketball does go way back to kind of, and it's all kind of, I guess, led to sort of where you are today. So I guess to kind of give the overview, like if you were to kind of give someone a couple-minute version of your background leading up to the point of founding City of Birmingham, what would you say? What is that background that led to that point?
Okay, well, so I probably picked a ball up first of all when I was maybe 13, 14 years old, as many kids even today, which I think is too late. By the way, that's another story. But but at that point within the school gym. So I think it was a school-based thing. But at the same time as that, it coincided. I got a very close friend whose parents went and helped out down at the Bullets at the old Villa Leisure Centre. So on a Saturday night, we started going to watch the games and stuff. And immediately then, really, I was in awe of probably just the whole atmosphere and environment and the excitement. My previous experiences in sport had been watching traditional English sports, so football, cricket. But basketball just to me, immediately had just an excitement about it, maybe a constant excitement that I didn't think those sports probably brought at the same time. I still love all sports to this day. But I think the constant excitement of basketball was something that I found really appealing. And I'll never forget the first game I went to. I think Bullets were playing Sunderland, as it was in the old Sunderland. And one of Bullets' import players at the time was Butch Hayes. And he just picked a steal up. It was midway through the second half, and he picked his steal up, picked somebody's pocket, and did this 360 in transition. And it was the most amazing sight I think I'd ever seen in a sports arena at that stage. And so from that point, I started playing a little bit out of school then. Got involved in it. Spent a lot of my youth down at the old BAI, which has been the Birmingham Sports Centre, which is no longer now, which is probably one of the better basketball facilities that we had at the time in the city. A guy down there, another Bullets player down there, Neville Hopkins was the coach there, and he kind of mentored me through until there was one Saturday morning we finished a session. And there was a group of kids on the corresponding court with no coach that turned up. And I'd have probably been early 20s at this stage. I recognised I wasn't going to become an elite level player, but I loved the sport. I had a passion for the sport, and I'd already kind of got involved with looking at coaching badges and those kind of things. And I bumped into somebody on the way out that I knew and said, "Oh, these kids have got no coach. Would you mind just starting the session off?" And so I did. And it was a group of kids that had come through. It was champion coaching at the time. Was the scheme. And we took these kids on, and there was I was inspired by their enthusiasm and how hard these kids wanted to work, and the respect they showed for someone they didn't know that had just walked in there and asked them to do a few drills. Really, was where I'd gone. And that group, that was the beginning of my coaching journey. Really, I mean, I never looked back from that day. I coached that group, a number of really talented players in that group, Richard Wellings, Wayne Robinson, Danny Kerr, bless his soul, is no longer with us. And I had 3 years, I think, with those guys, seen them through, went on to other teams within the Bullets junior programme. And that's what it was. Sorry, I probably should have mentioned it. It was the Bullets under 13 team, I think, at the time. So the next 5 or 6 years were just spent around the Bullets junior programme, I guess learning my trade, Sam, as well. So that came to an end when the Bullets went into liquidation, or as they were at the time, when Craig Bowen took over from Harry, and after a couple of seasons they folded. But I got the coaching bug at that stage, and I think if we fast forward, I was working in a banking job at the time, and as a young guy, I had no real idea where that career was taking me. Didn't enjoy it, but enjoyed the money in my pocket, if I'm being honest, on a monthly basis. Couldn't spend it for trying. But as that went on, it was actually, I want to be more productive in my days. I want to be doing, life's too short for me to be doing something that I didn't enjoy and wasn't passionate about doing. And a number of I guess community coaching jobs along the way, and then I was going away on holiday. A good friend of mine was just going to work on a cruise ship around the Caribbean, Sam. And so there was me and another friend and from the basketball world that said, "Oh, we'll come and see you." So we flew out to Miami. We did a week around the Caribbean on this cruise ship for next to nothing as family members. And then I had a week in Miami on the way back. But the guy that I'd gone with, a guy named Paul Virgo, who's still on the basketball, the refereeing circuit now here in Birmingham. He was a college lecturer down at North Birmingham College, north of the city. And Paul had said, look, we're setting a golf academy up here in the next, they've already got a football academy naturally, but we're doing this golf academy. I said, golf, you're in the middle of inner city Birmingham, really. Are you sure you're going to be able to get kids to come to that? He said, well, look, if it doesn't happen, we'll look at a basketball one. And I'll give you a shout. I thought nothing more of it. But sure enough, about 3 weeks later, he called. He said, look, can we go on the basketball route? Can you come and do some stuff with us? We'll give you 12 hours a week. And that was it. Sam, I put my resignation in the bank the next day.
For a 12-hour-a-week coaching job?
For a 12-hour-a-week coaching job, you can imagine, I was still living at home at the time, and my dad's an old-fashioned guy when he was alive, but as long as my money's on the table at the end of the month, said, but I think you're daft giving up a banking. It's a job for life. All the old adages, as you can imagine, they probably aren't true now. What career is there in sports? Rah rah rah. So yeah, went into that. But then managed to pick up some 2-3 hour slots a week with other institutions. One of those was the University of Birmingham. So Pete Mintoft. And Pete and I are really good friends now. I mean, Pete works at the club now, and he's just one of the most outstanding men you could ever wish to meet. But Pete did my coaching courses, my level 2. And he said, look, come and join me down at the university. And they were playing, I think, National League 3 at the time, as well as the abuse stuff. So I spent my time there just learning a little bit from Pete where we were at. And he said, look, I've got no money to pay you, but there is a bursary at the end of the year, 600 quid, that you can use for coach development purposes. So again, this same friend that was working the cruise ship said by this stage landed in Brisbane, and he was living there with his partner. So I thought, I'm going to kill two birds with one stone here. I wrote to the Birmingham Bullets organisation, as they were at the time, said, look, I'm coming over for the summer. Is there any chance I can just come and sit and make notes and watch you guys in action? And the guy was, yeah, of course you can. Come over. So I went, stayed. I'd got a place to stay with a friend over there. I'd be out the door at 8:30 every morning, go to watch them in their practice. They train in the morning, as you can imagine, take a break for lunchtime, and they'd come back and do individuals in the afternoon in the weights room. So learned so much during that period just by being around that and seeing how that worked. Came back, and then I picked up a job then at Josiah Mason College. So I'd moved on from North Birmingham. Josiah Mason had a really good reputation, basketball reputation. Herman Wilson had the program beforehand. He finished his stint there and then needed a replacement. So I went in there again, maybe 14, 15 hours a week, I think, managed to build up to on that program. I had some great years there. But the college, Sam, was so supportive, both of the player development, but also the coach development side of things. So we managed the first year, we got some funding to take two of the guys back to Australia to work out with this team for the summer. So we did, again, another 8-week stretch back in Brisbane. Amazing memories. And I've got some lifetime friends that I made there at that time. But to open the kids' eyes to, there were two inner city kids, Sean and Wesley, to open their eyes to what was out there, just made me realise that, you know what, these kids are being sold short back at home because we can only offer them so much. So I did that. Then again, the college supported us on some links we had a really good partnership with a college in Swansea. We got some of the kids over to tournaments in Eindhoven. They supported us on a trip over to Lipscomb University in Nashville for some summer camp there. And we spent a week over there with a group of the kids as well. At that stage, it was so far removed from my days in the bank where 9 to 5 he stuck behind a desk. I had all the enthusiasm and motivation I needed, really. And the financials at that stage didn't really matter to me. I just so enjoyed doing what I was doing. And, as you'll be aware, Sam, I guess the flip of that was, some mornings you're out the house at 6:30 to get to a 7 o'clock morning session, and you can still be out at 10:15 at night, finishing off the last session of with maybe a lunchtime session in the school in between. So, it wasn't, I was at an age where my body could deal with that. and I didn't feel the tiredness. I can assure you that's changed over the years now. but alongside that, I was always aware that maybe I needed some core hours somewhere. And whether it was by luck or judgment, the Active Sports with the Sport England scheme at the time had come along. And there was a job going with Birmingham City Council, who were hosting the post 20 hours a week. Basically to get basketball going in the city, really. The Bullets program had closed. There was very, very, very little basketball happening. And one of the weaknesses of the Bullets program, I always thought anyway, as a youngster growing up, when I got involved around there, was that unless you kind of made that National League level team, there wasn't a lot underneath that. So from a participation point of view and development point of view, it was really difficult. So part of the Active Sports program scheme or plans were, let's create a number of sessions around the city where just kids can access locally. And then we'll bring them together once a month on a central venue league basis. And the city had just had this new facility built at Nechells with Sport England funding. So the other part of my role and my remit there was, can you get the centre, if not filled, can you help us meet Sport England's requirements, which I think at the time were over 50% of peak usage needed to be basketball in that centre. So off we went from there, really. We placed coaches. There was a little bit of money to pay coaches for a couple of hours a week who would go out and promote in certain areas in schools, and then set up a weekend session, really, based in and around the areas. So I think we had 6 around the city at the time.
And was this under the club banner? Or the club hadn't been formed yet, or was it?
The club hadn't been formed at this stage. This was Birmingham Active Sports. This was 2002, I think, Sam. But what I would say is very, very quickly, when we brought these kids together for these once a week central venue leagues, as it was for the first 3 or 4 months, we really quickly recognised that there was some talent there and ability, some kids that needed to play. So what I did, rightly or wrongly, I formed a City of Birmingham Active Sports under 13 and under 14 or 2 squads that we put into National League, and used that kind of the funding that we'd got for there was a set of funding for the elite level kids, as it were. I say the elite, the performance-based kids, and we used that money to help underpin a National League program. Now, in the meantime, a couple of good friends of mine, Herman Wilson and Steve Ellis, who was on the refereeing circuit, as you'll know, for many years. Steve was working as a school sports partnership manager down the road at Aston. The 3 of us got together and said, look, can we do something about a team and some longevity to this? And that was really the first time we looked at how do we get a little bit of funding to get things moving. So Steve wrote the bid to Sport England, and we got a little bit of money in. And the following season, then we started City of Birmingham Basketball Club, as it was. So that was the starting point there. But I mean, what I would say, Sam, those central venue leagues quickly turned into weekly central venue leagues. And some of those kids that come through the doors, right early doors, so in Miles Hessen, Kofi Josephs, there was a lot of kids there with an appetite for basketball that just needed to be able to play. And it wasn't particularly structured. The coaching wasn't at any great level or anything, but from a central venue league point of view and letting them express themselves and play, before we knew it, 60, 70 kids every week across the 2 courts.
Wow.
And that grew really quickly. And that was really kind of the formation of how we got to starting the club.
How when you talk about that sort of that early stage of setting up CVLs, obviously for people that don't know, that's a central venue league where you've got essentially a single venue which the entire competition will take place in. When you talk about sort of raising awareness of that, recruiting players and teams to come and play in that, so you haven't got an empty gym every Saturday or whenever you run it. Like, what was the actual process? Is that a direct result of working with the school support partnerships and getting into schools, or was it something else? If I was trying to set my own CVL, like, what would you say to me if you were giving me advice on how I would go out to recruit players and raise awareness of a CVL?
Yeah, number of strategies really, Sam, I would suggest there. I found, and again, because I had the time to do it, I'd arranged to go and deliver free sessions in schools around the city and do a couple of hours. Can I have I think it was, the funding was initially aimed at year 7s and 8s. We made it a year 9 under 14 central venue league because I recognised that it's no point doing anything for 1 year and then being able to then running out of that funding. So we was kind of able to grow. We grew the kids into that. So getting out there, first of all, the face-to-face stuff and just giving them the best fun experience you could with a little bit of coaching in the school sessions was kind of the initial point. But then it really was getting word out. So, we'd write out to every school. We'd obviously try to use teachers' contacts that we knew personally, because even to this day, getting information through to the right person at school to get to the kids can be a real challenge. But it was really before the days of social media, so there wasn't the opportunity to do some of those things and just show how exciting it could be. So the personal touch certainly worked. And I found, to begin with, I did the majority of coaching myself, but I was able to employ maybe, a couple of coaches alongside me that we could send out. And then we got the local sites that had started. So kids from there started to say, actually, you know what, maybe I need to go into to Nechells now, because there's something a little bit more exciting happening there than local sites. And that on occasions that was the detriment of the local situations within the schools, which was I guess one of the things that was probably a downside of the success of Nechells. And we had to restart them, but they soon grew back up again. But it was a case of word of mouth. Once kids, it's like anything, isn't it? We had the same problem with our girls program when we kind of first launched that. Getting the first few girls through the doors was really difficult. And when you've got, we get, even now, we'll get the amount of interest we'll get from parents or girls, can I come and join your program? It's fine now because we've got a program for them to join. But right from the outset, when they come in on their own, and you've maybe got a coach working with 1 kid or 2 kids for a couple of weeks, that can be disheartening if you're not looking at the bigger picture. But I think what we try to do now is think on the scale of, look, if we don't get kids through the door on week 1, that's not the end of the world. It's just getting 2 or 3 kids to make a commitment to jump on 2 or 3 buses to get across the city, or get a parent to bring them, is a bigger thing than maybe we kind of give credit for sometimes. So it's not always that easy. But once you've got an environment and then a little bit of atmosphere in there, and kids going hard at it, I think when newer kids come in, then it kind of grows, doesn't it? But it's that initial starting point. I just think my one bit of advice is give it time, and don't expect it to happen straight away.
Yeah. You say give it time, but funnily enough, by year 2, you're in a situation where you have over 140 attendees to your first club trials, and from the first year where you had entered under 14 National League, you then had under 13, under 15, under 16, under 18 boys age groups. So that's grown pretty quickly. What do you attribute that growth to? Do you think it was just a case of there wasn't a lot going on, and there was just all this latent sort of, I guess, hunger for it that just wasn't able to be fulfilled because there just wasn't the opportunities for people to play?
Yeah, in one respect, we grew too quick, Sam, because having a structure in place to manage that initially was really challenging. And if I'm being self-critical and looking back, we probably got 6 clubs within a team, 6 teams within a club. Get the wording right. And to align that together and get a consistency across the club took a long time for that to happen. In fact, something we worked on really, really heavily during lockdown on that. But
what can you describe in more detail, like what are those growing pains to go from essentially one team to 5, 6 within the space of a year? Like what happens? What are the problems with growing that quickly when you perhaps don't have that infrastructure to be able to support it?
I think quality of staff was the first thing. You know, we had a lot of really amazing, willing volunteers, but then they were probably thrown into a situation that they weren't ready for. You know, dealing with young people and their experiences on that, having the knowledge and ability to take those kids forward, I guess would be another one. You know, the 140 kids you talked about. So that first set of trials that we ran, which I think was 2004, you know, you suddenly got, I don't know, 50 kids coming through the doors at under 30. We used to run it under 13 and 14, under 15, 16 together, and then under 18s. So it's 3 sessions during the day. You know, you suddenly on the first session, you've got 40 odd kids come through the door. It's like, oh wow, okay, didn't expect this. 15, 16s, 60 kids walk through the door. It's like, oh my goodness, how do we cope with this? You know, we only got 2 coaches on, and then under 18s come through the door, and you've got another 40 kids there. And then I think it was at that point then you recognise actually there's a market for this. There's a demand for it. These kids want to play, and some from every background around the city as well. And that's always been one of the things synonymous with the club. You know, we like to represent the city's population and communities, and then even to this day, you know, we got representation from so many different communities across the city. But going back to those numbers and the growth, you know, one of the hardest things we always found was what happens to those kids that at the trials don't make teams. You know, and we did our best. We tried to direct them into our central venue leagues or our community sessions. But of course, you've got kids that go away disappointed. They've come to a trial and their goal and ambition is to make a squad, and we've sent them away unhappy, really. And that was one of the things over the years that we tried. And I think. Guys, I think we've done. You know, I think we've managed to do a better job on that. But initially, in those early years, catering for all the kids that came through the doors was challenging. So, you know, you might break your squads down. You might pick 15 kids at each squad to start with. So those 6 squads become 90 kids. And the growing pains there were just, from my perspective, trying to coach one of the teams myself, trying to maybe assist with another to help a young coach along the way, and keeping an eye on what was going on with the other 4 groups is nigh on impossible, really. You know, and it took up a lot of time, which I loved. But actually trying to develop the staff at the same time was something I probably didn't do as a great job on looking back now. So they were the main pains. And then there's the obvious financial challenges. You know, we got a broad mix of kids that were coming into the club from inner city, from Greater Birmingham, you know, from all sides, and some could afford to pay, some couldn't. And you're trying to tally that up. And again, it was kind of, you know, we got there without a great deal of financial planning in the first instance, really. We just kind of followed our nose and went along. In the centre, we were very supportive. There were times where we couldn't afford to pay bills on time and we had to delay that. But they helped us along the way on that. But the finances, I mean, that's obviously a big challenge. And that's one of the things with Birmingham, because you've got such diverse communities, and to work to put together a pricing plan that works for everybody, can, you know, whether it's monthly payments or sessional payments, who we can support with bursaries, is you know, it's a tricky one, really, because we also know now that we have to plan effectively if we're going to have a future, and we can't be reliant on, you know, grant support or sponsorship. You know, how do we diversify our income, really, and our revenue streams is something we've been looking at, you know, more recently, really.
I do want to talk about the sort of financial modelling, but just briefly before we do, obviously at this point in the club, you weren't full time on purely the City of Birmingham. You obviously had your job with the council. A question, like, was the City of Birmingham club did that fall under your role with the council, so you're kind of you're able to double up? It's not like it's a completely separate job, like as if you're in banking and it's like 9 to 5, this is what you're doing, then afterwards you're allowed to do the club. Was that what allowed you to balance the two, because it kind of fitted into both roles?
Yeah, absolutely. I've obviously formed the club through my role there with the council. So the Active Sports Partnership role was a 4-year short-term contract. At the end of that, then the council kept me on for a year or two, really, with no particular remit. So it was basketball specific, so I could carry on delivering the club and looking at other basketball projects through that role. And then as time went on, it became a club development role, I think, as we went on a community development role. The club kind of always fell under those remits, so I was able to ensure anyway that at least parts of the club were serviced through my time in that role. But as you can imagine, as that grew, and by I think the time we got to 2008-9, we were probably hitting 10 teams, and probably seeing 100 kids a week on the community program. At that point there, the infrastructure we got in the club wasn't, with I guess me overseeing virtually everything, it wasn't sufficient for what we had. So I was very fortunate in the roles that I'd got. They did allow me some time to work on the club, but it certainly wasn't full-time work, and it kind of got to a point where we felt, we've gone as far as we can here as a voluntary organisation. We need to look towards the future as to what happens if I wasn't around for any reason, or if any of the other key staff or key volunteers weren't around. How do we make sure there's some longevity to this?
At what point was it that then you were able to go full time on the club?
So that came through, Sam, in around, believe it or not, it was 2015 before I was officially full time. And I was working full time hours for a long time on it, but it was we went. We formed a community interest company in 2013. That's Kirk, who by the time I'd managed to drag Kirk in as a coach initially. So his son Jordan played for me for a couple of 2 or 3 seasons. I'd known Kirk from the circuit from playing when I was younger, and managed to drag him in as a coach in the first instance. Kirk then was working on basically gun and gangs crime work across Birmingham, and it was was the major player in the mediation process with the police he was working with at the time. Kirk gave us some sponsorship, so he'd sponsored all the kits, and we were able to buy new sets of kits across the club. But he also had a real interest in not just the basketball side of things, but he recognised maybe that by being at the club, what it did for the kids. So, just that sense of belonging, that environment, family environment, the support, the informal mentoring that the kids were getting, educational support at some stage. And Kirk at that point was really keen to get involved as a board member. So we threw him in as chair of the board, really from that point. So fast forward then maybe a year or two, Kirk had recognised with the growth of the club that we'd gone as far as we could on a voluntary basis, and my role with the council was kind of nearing its end. The austerity measures were beginning to kick in, so I knew that was going to be over soon. Kirk said, "Well, what we'll do," and there was another guy, Bill Heaps, who was initially one of our forming directors at the outset. The three of us, they said, "Well, look, let's pay Rob a part-time salary as it was to begin with, and let him crack on and dedicate some time to club activity." And fortunately, being able to spend more time on it and really enabled I guess, a little bit more planning to take place, a little bit more long-term thinking, a bit more strategy. And by then, we managed to attract, there's a couple of fabulous guys. There's a guy called Roger Telfair, who's now a director of the club. But Roger used to sponsor us year on year and just make a donation, didn't want any credit for it, just saw the good that it did for young people. And I guess with nuggets of investment and into the club like that, it just then put us on a little bit more of a level footing from a financial point of view. We've got schools that had started to ask us about, can you send a coach in for a couple of hours? Before we'd known it, we were in 25 schools a week, sending out coaches for probably delivering 35, 40 hours. That in itself needs managing, and there's a number of things, quality assurance that needs to take place on that as well as anything. And I guess we just looked a little bit more stable, and it was 2015. And the guy said, look, let's make this a full-time role now and see if we can push things on a bit further.
When you switched to full-time, do you think that did allow you to push things further in terms of when you look at the revenues of the club, its growth? Do you think that directly coincided with the fact that, all of a sudden you've got one person that's really trying to drive things forward, and then because of the extra money that's maybe able to come in as a result of that, you then be able to provide more opportunities for more coaches to be able to sort of, grow that local basketball economy?
Yeah, absolutely. Being able to dedicate your whole time to something is there's no doubt about it has made, I guess, has been enabled me just to push things on a little bit more, Sam, and become a bit focused. And there's a number of things that I knew we had to do. I said a couple of times already, our growth had overtaken our structure. So as a voluntary organisation trying to deliver what we were doing, with we played out a local authority centre, but there's not local authority financial support or anything like that there. Sorry, Sam, I thought I lost you for a moment. So we're kind of running solo really, and trying to almost find our own way through the dark as to how we got there, and living year by year, hand to mouth in terms of the finances. And that was something that needed to change. Recognise that straight away, but I didn't want that to impact upon our members heavily, and stop kids playing because the cost is too much. But at the same time, we've got to have a more organised model really moving forward, and take a bit of stock and recognise what we've got. And that's helped with funders really in terms of, our activity, community activity is huge. So, be fair to say now with our performance program, our national league teams and things that happen at Nechells, along with our community program, we're now getting to probably, pre-COVID, on average about 800 kids a week across the city. Now some of that might be in school settings, community settings, or at our base. But that's a pretty big reach. And I think sometimes we, and basketball's pretty good at this. We don't sell what we do enough, and we don't shout loudly enough about what we do. Now, obviously, the coinciding factor is not long after I'd been made full time, we started to just look at what a board might look like and trying to get some governance in place. Was the arrival of Hakeem then as well, which obviously that really helped us focus our minds really on where we wanted to take this, because then there was a realism that actually you've got somebody this good saying how good we are, the confidence that builds within you, was huge, and that obviously opened up then a lot of other avenues that we've been down since. So absolutely, working on it full time. Simple things like phone calls and tapping into people. So I'm taking visits to other clubs. I spent some time with Joe at Manchester, just seeing how they go about their business, getting the feedback there. Having the freedom in the daytime to pick up a phone for an hour or two just to discuss and chew ideas over was immense. And we've had over the years, we've had some great guys at the club. Dougie spent a lot of time with us, and we're still really good friends now. He's still a really big supporter of the club, but tapping into his knowledge and experience. And then the other thing for me, really, I suppose, along the way has been, and I talked earlier about the international stuff, was that recognition that the sport's done a lot better in other parts of the world. And yes, there are differences in how operations need to work, but there's lots we can learn from those. So some really good connections we've made along the way. There's a Swedish connection which started through some work at the City Council, but then turned into a basketball club connection. The last couple of years, I had a really strong relationship with Alicante, HLA Alicante, who are led gold in Spain. And just being able to spend my daytime on occasions talking to those guys or visiting, that opens your eyes maybe to where things could go.
When you talk about the financial modelling of the club and how actually everything is financed, how you're able to take a salary, kind of what is it? What are the revenue streams at the moment? Like, how does that actually work?
Okay, so our financial growth has gone through the roof, as you can imagine, in the last 5 years, mainly down to the community arm. So, right now, our team stuff, our National League structure, Sam, we have to underpin that with external funds. So, the memberships and subscriptions that we charge for that certainly don't cover the costs. So if I was to tell you that, our facility hire costs for the year will range between just under 40,000 to about 45,000, dependent upon year. So there's a huge resource there that goes out. We've been able and really fortunate in recent times. We had a successful funding bid with the HS2 community scheme, so that was able to deliver a reasonably big project across to schools in Nechells and the local community, and those that were affected, I think they were in 3 miles of the classes in 3 miles of the HS2 line. So
HS2 is the high-speed train line.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a station going to be based down at Curzon Street City Centre. So the HS2 scheme the community scheme was a funding pot that was available for those, I guess, affected within 3 miles of the line. So where we were based in Nechells, our base there came within that perimeter. And we put a project on where we would deliver, what have we got? We got we did have 3 coaches on that, delivering up to 24 hours a week of in-school coaching. So again, we were able to utilise some of their time back into administration of the clubs and support of the club, and topped some of their salaries up with some sponsorship funding that we'd received from elsewhere to enable them to really work a little bit more on the club. So although their focus was the community work within their remit, we were finding we were picking other work up off the back of that as well in schools. So again, we got coaches then that had aligned time to the project that we could then send out to other schools as well. So we still right now our turnover for the past 18 months, only around 25 to 30% of that is covered from the subscriptions that we bring from memberships. And, again, I said earlier, we are very keen that we keep playing affordable to the players, but it's been through a number of projects that we've delivered where we could employ administrators or coaches that we've been able to grow the staff and grow salaries. So, I think the one thing that was a bugbear for a while with a lot of funders was that they'd fund projects, but they wouldn't fund administration of them. So who's going to pick up all of that admin? Who's going to complete portals and registers and reports for you? Because that's not fund. That's not covered in funding. So as time has grown, I think funders have got better with that. And we've been able to. So a lot of the funding that we've attracted, we've been able to sideline some administrational funds for that have helped supplement salaries.
So when you talk about the breakdown, so if you've got 25 to 30% is coming directly from player subs, that 70-75%. What's the breakdown between like commercial revenues, I guess, sort of private donations, and then I assume like funding pots, like public funding pots that you can apply for, and I guess anything else that I've missed.
Yeah, so some splits there really. I mean, donations and sponsorship, commercial sponsorships. We've that's an area that we're really working on at the moment to try and increase. You may say that probably down at maybe 15-20%, Sam. I'd say at the moment on that. Public funds and applications maybe 25-30% on that. Obviously, what we have done is taken on. We've got we have an academy down at Solihull that creates some of that. So now community income again generates around 20-25%. One of the reasons we went into the international summer camp with Hakeem, one to create an amazing product, but we were hoping that might generate some revenue. But in all honesty, very, very minor what we make off that. But one of the reasons for that is that we've always employed a high number of staff to give a real quality experience to the kids. So we probably shot ourselves in the foot there a little bit from a generating revenue point of view. But the camps have been, they've been an inspirational thing, and they're probably the best thing we tend to do each year. But there's areas around there that we need to look at in our camp program, whether we can expand that moving forward. I think that would certainly help us.
Do you have other full-time employees outside of yourself?
Yeah, we do. So we've got two of our coaches. One of our coaches. So Ricardo, Ricardo, we initially employed through some funding that we received last year as a kind of media type guy, media marketing guy on a part-time contract, and he was also coaching for us on a voluntary basis, but probably working about 70 hours a week and getting paid for about 10 in all honesty. So he's an amazing resource. We've very recently over the summer, so an old friend of mine who's a head down at an academy trust in the city centre, really sees and understood the value that sport can have on young people's lives. We'd spoken over a period of time about what could we do with the club and how could that work and could we get a coach in. Well, they finally managed to secure their funds to get. So he basically works in a high school for 20 hours a week for us. So he's based purely in one high school and then does our marketing and media in the other hours. So he's a full-timer for us. Pete Mintoft, I mentioned, he's over at Solihull Academy. And then he kind of oversees the rest of the community program, coach development. So he's a full-timer. So it's the three of us on full-time. And then we've got, at the moment, another three part-timers as well.
How much scope do you think there is for growth compared to where you are now, and where you could be when you talk about the sort of the size and scale of Birmingham? Do you think there is a lot of room for you to be able to expand a lot further than you already have done?
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes down to revenue streams again, Sam. There's no doubt about that. There's an appetite for the sport across the city. I'm convinced of that. What it is really about is giving a quality product and experience, to anybody. So, I guess one of the challenges we have is how can you find a quality coach to go to a school if the school is saying, well, we'll have them for 1 hour a week and we'll pay you £25. Now obviously from our perspective, then we've got to take a little, we have to take our administrational thing out of that, and we're paying the coach what really amounts to by the time they've kind of travelled and gone home, they're probably doing two hours work for a very small amount of money. So we're looking at that as a business model right now. How does that work, and is that right for us moving forward? I think revenue streams, like I said, there are lots of avenues that we know we've got to do a better job on, and we've got to explore more. And the commercial side of that is one, and hopefully the facility renovation may bring some opportunities around that. I think it will always be. We're always going to have to recognise that we're always going to need some full-timers, but some part-timers, and still a volunteer workforce as well. There's always going to be an element of that. But I do think there's opportunity for growth. Certainly, there's areas we haven't explored yet. We're just really at our infancy of the female side of the program and trying to get that moving. There's areas around our mini basketball program. We think we could engage a lot more kids around that. And obviously at the senior end, as things move forward, we're hoping we'll be able to get an audience or spectators through the doors at some stage that may generate a revenue there as well, Sam. So there's lots of potential there. Piecing that all together is another piece of work. But we're confident of making it happen. We really do feel that the sport is in I wouldn't say a good place in the city, but there's a lot of positivity around the kids and around certainly the community that we have coming through the doors, and I see at other clubs around the city. There's a lot of really good stuff going on.
How optimistic are you of the Commonwealth Games having an impact? We've always in the run up to these things, London 2012 being the most obvious example of we hear about kind of legacy and the impact it's going to have, and it's going to drive all these new people, new faces into basketball that weren't there before. Do you feel like realistically? Do you think that the Commonwealth Games could have any type of impact like that? Do you feel like it's going to have any impact on that? Do you, as you as a club, are you planning for a sort of bigger influx of kids potentially after the Commonwealth Games, or do you think it's just going to be an event that sort of comes and goes and doesn't really change things when you're talking about the sort of the long-term landscape of the sport in the city?
Well, I hope it's the former. I hope it. Having worked and been involved in the promotional event when they announced the venue down at Smithfield on the old wholesale market site, there was a real buzz around that day. Great city centre venue, very accessible to people from the city, and I think that kind of fan park area they're going to have there with the basketball arena next to it has got some real potential. Now, of course, the other benefits for the city there, you've got Miles Hesson, and we've got Kofi Joseph. So Kofi's done a lot of work, around the media side of that as well. Hopefully, those two guys might be in contention to being in the team, which I think again will generate a real local interest and attraction. Rhiannon Bailey came down. Again, she's a local girl, and did from the female side of things as well. So we've got, I guess, a real good starting point there. We're in, obviously, regular communications with the Commonwealth Games organisers about how we can help in the promotion moving forward and align as a local club aligned to that brand. Will it generate more through the doors? We really hope so, Sam. Time will tell on that. I think what the Commonwealth Games guys recognise that they need to do is ensure the games get to local communities, and it's not just something that's, I guess, dropped into Birmingham and then pulled out. I think the important thing there is that local communities feel part of the games, and they have started a campaign recently, a Hometown Heroes campaign, of which one of our own guys, Ricardo, who I mentioned, was I guess the first guy on that list. So his face has gone into certain local communities, just about an unsung hero type guy that goes above and beyond the expectation to support young people in local sport. So I think it has to reach local communities for them to feel part of the Commonwealth Games and everything that happens. And I really hope it does that. I think basketball's got a real good chance with it being based where it's based. It's so accessible just down from the Bullring shopping centre, US centre based. So as long as that's accessible for people to go into maybe the fan park that's alongside there and get tickets for games as well, obviously, then that might provide the boost that we all want, and generate more players. But as I said, there's a lot of kids that play at school across the city anyway. One of the challenges that all clubs have is getting kids to make that transition from school to club.
100%. I'm aware of time. I know you've got to shoot. That was super insightful. I would love to do a catch-up after the facility is done, maybe close to the Commonwealth Games as well, maybe after the Commonwealth Games, see how it's all panned out compared to sort of this conversation as we look ahead. I wish you all the best with it, and hopefully we will catch up soon.
No, really appreciate it. Thanks for your time, Sam.